Ever since I was young, I used to think about if ghosts existed or not. See, I always imagined that if ghosts existed, they would look like this. What? Were you expecting something to show up on the slide? Psych. I don't know what ghosts look like. They're probably somewhere in there. Just don't know what they look like. But this talk is not about ghosts. But somewhere, somehow, I'm going to tie it in to ghosts. I was born in Nigeria, and for those who grew up watching Africa Magic, no, this isn't the part where I tell you about the ghosts. I was born in Nigeria, and when I was 2, went to Kenya. When I was 4, we went to Tanzania, and when I was 10, we came down south to Botswana. Now, as a child, I'd seen a lot of things, interesting things. But I wasn't prepared for one thing when I came to Botswana, and that is pedestrian cows. I never knew that cattle would be crossing the road. I always thought that cows belong in a farm. So it was a fun thing to see, but little did I know that cows will be a point of annoyance for me when I grew up. And so I grew up. I studied finance at the University of Botswana. And when I was there, I noticed something. It was quite new to me. I noticed that the students at the university were always in some sort of financial trouble. The allowances didn't last at the end of the month. They used to borrow quite a lot. Loan sharks took advantage of them. It was worrisome because we got roughly the same amount, about $100 back then, except I got it from my dad and they got it from the government, roughly around the same amount. So why is it that I could manage mine, but theirs were not managed well? Until someone came to me and told me, Malik, listen, man, you're speaking from a place of privilege. And I said, how? And they said that your money is your money, but they have to manage it for themselves and for family back home. It was shocking to me. It was news to me because I never heard of parents, guardians being taken care of by kids who are in varsity, 16, 17-year-olds. I was told that it's the parents or guardian's duty to take care of the child. I grew up further, and my first job was as a wealth consultant. My duty was to sell financial products to individuals who wanted to invest in the offshore markets. Now, it was a sales gig, but the way I approached the sales was more of an academic point of view. So instead of just trying to sell, I wanted to educate them. My goal was to give them the knowledge so that they can empower themselves to make rational financial decisions and, hopefully buy the product. I didn't make much sales, but I hoped that my knowledge landed on them. But one thing that I noticed as a wealth consultant was that the prospects I met only ever wanted 2 things: cows, cattle, farming, and real estate, housing, property, building multi-residentials for rent. It used to baffle me because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I'm giving you a tool to be able to empower yourselves financially, to be able to create wealth for your future, but you were just stuck on these 2 things. It was almost cultural. And then it hit me. It is cultural. You see, culture is a system of shared norms, values, and beliefs held by a group of individuals. Culture has various perspectives. Culture is a dynamic phenomenon that is shaped by the interactions between a diverse group of people. It is what is both shared and the differences. Beauty about culture as well is that you can have an overarching culture, and you can also have your subcultures. So your overarching culture could be the culture of your hometown or your home village, where you come from. And then your subcultures could be that of your family, of your friendships, of your relationships, of your organization. So you have your overarching culture and you have your subcultures, and these are quite different. Culture can also vary in a lot of things. It can vary from food. For example, how Nigerian jollof is better than Ghana jollof. It can vary from music, art, entertainment. It can also vary from behavior, manner, perspective. Was I supposed to bow when I greeted him or shake his hand? This person is too close to me. They're invading my personal space. She touched my hair. In my culture, that is considered rude and offensive. Good thing I don't have to deal with that, huh? So you see, culture is quite diverse. Now, imagine this situation. Imagine you have a partner or a friend that every time you fed them noodles or spaghetti, they made the sound. How did that sound make you feel? You see, some people may say it was such a cringe sound, because why are you making noise while you're eating? It's similar to chewing with your mouth open. It's bad table manners. But in some cultures, specifically Japan, that sound is actually considered a sign of a compliment, akin to a chef's kiss, that I liked your food so much that I am going to make a sound when I eat it. So you see, cultures are quite different, and which is why we must be respectful of people's cultures. Dutch social psychologist Gert Hofstede divided culture into 6 dimensions. And as I go through these dimensions, I want you to think about your own culture or your subcultures and see where they lie on these dimensions. The first one we're going to talk about is power distance. Power distance just simply speaks to how a culture or a society is okay with unequal power of distribution, unequal distribution of power. Cultures that rank high on this power distance scale are okay with authority, whereas those that rank low are okay with equality. They value equality more. Then you have your individualistic versus your collectivist cultures, which just simply speaks to how cultures value independence or personal success versus the success of a group. You have uncertainty avoidance. On the uncertainty avoidance dimension, you're simply speaking about ambiguity. Cultures that rank high on the uncertainty avoidance don't like ambiguity. They don't like the risk of the unknown. So they prefer roles, they prefer structure, because it relieves the stress of not knowing. However, cultures who are low on this scale are okay with flexibility and improvisations. Masculine versus feminine culture speaks to self-assertiveness versus societal harmony. So masculine culture, they value self-assertiveness, achievements, material success. Whereas feminine culture value the quality of life, communication, community. And then we have your long-term cultures and your short-term. Your long-term cultures, as the word suggests, think about the future, think about savings towards the future, whereas those in the short term are more instant gratifications. They think about the now. And then the last one is the indulgence and restraint dimension. So in this, it just speaks to how cultures value, leisure. So those high on the indulgence scale, they like leisure, they like entertainment, they like fun. But those on the restraint scale, they emphasize more self-control, work ethic, and thrift. Let's look at some examples of different countries and where they lie on the scale. As you can see, the West is quite an individualistic culture. They value personal success, individual success, whereas the East is more collectivist. Some parts of Africa are also collective in nature. And I'm sure you also know the word of Ubuntu, togetherness. When you look at, for example, the indulgence, we see that the West is quite indulgent. Nigeria too, and South Africa. If you look at uncertainty avoidance, we see that Japan is quite high. So Japan is quite a special case here because they have this thing of filial piety. So some research has shown that because Japanese value filial piety, which is the propensity to want to take care of the elderly, they don't do anything that would jeopardize that ability to be able to take care of the elderly. So that's what filial piety is. So Japan would rank high on this scale, the uncertainty avoidance scale. And if you look at the long-term orientation, we see that the East thinks far into the future, whereas countries in Africa are more short-term in nature. So this is just to show you that different cultures rank differently on the dimensions, and they have the different scales. The question is now, how does this all fit in finance? Well, you see, culture affects your decisions. How? Through your behavior. So behavior is the linking factor between your culture and the decisions that you make. So, think of it like this. Your behavior comes from two things: your thoughts and your feelings. So your rationality and your emotions. I think, therefore I am. I feel, therefore I act. Sure, a number of you have felt down once in a while, and then you decided, I'm going to go for retail therapy. I'm going to act on my emotions and make myself feel better. This behavior affects your decisions. So the thing about behavior is that there's something called behavioral biases, and it is these biases that affect your decision making. Let's look at some examples. When you think of saving, if you're from a culture that is long-term in nature, you'd make the decision to save more. When you think of risk, for example, if you're from a culture which doesn't like ambiguity, what happens? You're going to want to take less risk. If you're from a culture that is high on the indulgence scale, you might be a consumer, So you might go in a consumerist, or rather you might have grown up in a consumerist culture, where you want to spend, you want to eat, and you have that instant gratification. Your behavioral biases affect your decision. Let's look at some examples of behavioral biases. The first one is conservatism bias. And this is the thing I experienced as a wealth advisor. In conservatism bias, you are slow to update the information that you have when presented with new information. So, because I know about real estate and agriculture, when I'm presented with new information about financial markets, I am slow to update my mental bank to now include new information. So I'm conservative in nature. I know what I know, and I'd rather stick to it. The problem with this is you can miss out on a lot of opportunities by being too conservative. The next one is overconfidence bias. My dad was a farmer, granddad was a farmer, my great-granddad was a farmer, and so on and so forth. So because I come from a line of farmers, I'm confident that I'm going to make it in farming. Well, you do know that sometimes the mighty fall. So if you have that hubris, if you have that overconfidence, it can affect the decisions that you make. You don't want to be too overconfident in something, because sometimes that overconfidence is the thing that's going to lead you to ruin. Another one is loss aversion. In loss aversion, you just don't like making losses. The problem with loss aversion is that just like a toxic relationship, you may be too slow to cut off or cut your losses because you've invested too much into it. So in finance, you may remain in assets that are bleeding you dry because you had invested so much into it, instead of just cutting your loss and trying to find the next best thing. And the last one is framing. So framing is just, it depends on how you frame certain things to people. If, let's say, I am very risk averse, and someone came to me and says, hey man, here's this investment opportunity, you have a 50% chance of making money. I'm going to be like, great, sign me up. But if that same person came and says, hey man, here's this investment opportunity, but you have a 50% chance of losing money. I'm like, no, that's too high. But you see, the thing is here, it's simply a coin toss, 50-50. I can either make money or I can lose money. But depending on how it was framed, that would determine the decision that I make. Again, culture, behavior, decisions. Now, the thing about this flow is that it can go in reverse. If you realize that your decisions are hurting you, if you realize that your decisions are making you lose money, if you realize that your decisions are not helping you grow your wealth, you can change them. You can build new habits, but that's the decision you have to make. So by building new habits, it then changes your behavior. So from someone who used to spend a lot every Friday, Saturday, weekends, holidays, now you can become more chilled. You can say, I'm building towards my future. So that behavior changes within you. And you can take that behavior and you can also influence your subcultures, the people close to you. It could be a family, a friend, a colleague, but you can influence the culture. And the more people do it, the more the culture changes. Remember, it's a system of shared values, beliefs, and norms. So if you lived in a country which was very indulgent, then you move to another country that's more self-restraint, and you pick up that culture, you can be that. And when you go back home, you can change the behaviors of those around you, if they're also willing to change. So culture, behavior, decision-making, behavior, you can change your culture. So it's quite amenable. Back to the ghosts. In cartoons, when ghosts possess the cartoon characters, they can influence how their hand moves, or their legs, or the directions they go. Just like the ghosts, culture is that same invisible hand that determines your actions through your behavior. But you have to decide if this culture is a helpful hand or a hurtful hand. And when you decide that, then you are taking your first step on that financial, fruitful future. I wish you the very best on your financial journey. Thank you.